Welcome to Crochet After Dark, podcast episode number 2. My name's April. If you're new here, this channel is all about crochet. I show you my works in progress, my finished objects, as well as share tutorials whenever I have the time to create them. So if you're not a subscriber and you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. In today's podcast, I have 4 finished objects to show you. I'm really excited that I'm finally starting to get my WIP list or my work in progress list down. So let's get started with what I've finished over the past week. The first one is this beautiful corner to corner scarf. And this is holding one strand of Nap Time. I think it's Lion brand, but I could be wrong, but maybe it's for Nap, but the yarn is called Nap Time. It's kind of soft, but not a velvet yarn. And then the other strand is this Hobby Rainbow yarn. And you can just see the beautiful color changes. I absolutely love. So this is one of 2 scarves that I had made last Christmas for different friends. And I loved these scarves so much that I really wanted to create one of each for myself. For this Nap Time yarn, I had actually run out and then couldn't find it anywhere because I think maybe people were buying it for Christmas gifts. So I wound up having to buy a skein of it off of Etsy, but I was able to get this project finished and I'm so thrilled with how it came out. The next scarf that I did is very similar, except that it's holding velvet yarn and one strand of Hobby Universe. Now for the Universe yarn, I got both the regular and the XL, and I'm not sure which one this is. I think it might be the XL with the velvet yarn. So this velvet yarn is so much softer and just really nice to the touch, but it's also not as easy to see the color change. So you can still see it in there. And when you wear it, you know, it's still, it's so beautiful, but you can kind of really see those, but it's just so soft and nice on your skin. So I really like it. And this was a Drunken granny stitch, just back and forth. So I will be writing up the stitch. These 2 stitches are very common, the corner to corner stitch and the Drunken granny stitch, but I'll be writing up the exact pattern, what I used, what my starting chains were, how many rows I worked, as well as links to the yarns that I used, just in case you want to create something similar. But I love the way these worked up. Unfortunately, it's getting to be summertime now here in Southern California, so I'm not going to get to wear them, but I'm still glad to have them finished and off of my works in progress list. The next finished object is this purse, and this is one of the first objects I had started working on when I kind of got back into crocheting a couple years ago, and then I got bored of it and just let it sit. So all I really had left to do was the strap, and I had already started it. What I did on the strap was a back and forth single crochet, just 6 single crochets back and forth. And single crochets for me are very boring, so I stopped working on it, but I finally got it done. I'm very happy with it. It's got a nice length to it. It can hold, you know, my wallet, my purse, lip gloss, all of that good stuff. So yeah, I'm glad to have that one done. And this was using comfort cotton in this kind of rainbow color, and then also the cream. And I don't remember where I got the pattern for this, but it's just half doubles and single crochets for most of it. And again, I'm not a big fan of single crochets, so I got kind of bored of it. The last finished object I have is one that I showed you guys last week. That's my beautiful shells blanket. Let me find the front here. This is the front. And I just had those couple of ends to weave in. And again, this is using Hobby's butterfly yarn in the colorway Monarch, I believe, which they're also currently sold out of. So I got some great ideas from you guys. I mentioned in the last podcast that I have 2 more skeins of this, not in the same color. It's in a different colorway. And I think what I decided is that I'm going to use the hobby yarn to create some motifs. And then the Bernat bundle up yarn is the most similar I have to this kind of weight and feel. It's not an exact match, but I think if I do like a flower motif, then I can use the Bernat for like an outer square or hexagon. But I'm not quite ready to add that to my whips list yet. I'll mention what I have planned a little bit later, but I've got some other ideas for my next whips. For whips, now that we're finished with finished objects, so that's all the projects that I finished. We have the 2 scarves, we have the purse, and I finished weaving in the ends on this butterfly blanket. Beautiful shells in the butterfly yarn. So if you watched last week's podcast, you saw that I was really working on the ends for this Juicy Fruits blanket, and I was really struggling with motivation to get through it. Now, if you watched my Whips and Weaving Wednesday video, I covered kind of the technique that I used for this, but basically what I did was all the ends for this blanket were on one side. And so I added stitch markers every 20 ends. So if I started here, then I would count 20 ends that needed to be weaved, add another stitch marker, and so on. And that really helped me find the motivation to get the ends weaved in on this blanket. So the ends are all now done. All that's left is to put a border. I did ask you guys last week for border ideas, and Margaret Rose actually suggested a front post, back post rib border. So I love that idea. I think it's going to be, this is a nice kind of thick, heavy blanket. And so I love the idea of a ribbed border for it, but a traditional ribbing I think was just going to take too long and doesn't really interest me for this big of a project. So I think I'll do a row of like single crochets, and then start my doubles and then start the front post, back post. And I'm really hoping to have this done this week and be able to show you guys, have it be a finished object for next week. So that'll be exciting to get that done. One of the great things about this blanket is it's really dense, so it doesn't have any gaps, and these shells are kind of really thick. So it's a nice heavy blanket. And as I've been crocheting at night with the door open to kind of let the breeze in, it's been really nice to keep me warm. Again, the kind of with the scarves, the sad thing is going to be that it's going to be too warm to use for the summer, but I'll be able to get it finished and then get it packed up, and we'll bring it back out next winter. So another whip that we looked at last week was my Rainbow Waves blanket. And I want to show you that method that I was talking about for the Juicy Fruits. I did apply to this blanket. So let me show you here. This is the Rainbow Waves. And this blanket has ends on both sides. So I started a little bit here, weaving in ends before, but this one does have ends on for every row, but on each side. So here's 2, and then I counted, and for this blanket I did 10, right? So I have a stitch marker here, and then you go 10 ends and you have another stitch marker, and I did that for both sides. And this has really been, here you can see my 2 stitch markers. This has really been helpful with the Juicy Fruits blanket to keep me motivated to just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to work on a block of 10. So I fold this up and I put it back here on my couch. So I'll work on another project that I have with my whip station. And then every night I'm going to try to get through at least 10 ends. So this blanket, I believe, has, it was either 100 or 200 ends. It's 100 rows, so it may be 200 ends. So that would be 20 days. So I may have to up 10 a day to 20 a day, but we'll see. On the weekends, I tend to have more kind of energy to deal with ends than I do on the weekdays. On the weekdays, once I get done with work, I kind of just want to, make dinner and then when I do sit down to crochet, I want to actually be crocheting and watching TV kind of with the lights off, instead of when I'm weaving in the ends, I actually turn on a light that I have so that I can see and make sure I get everything weaved in properly. But so this probably won't be done this week just because of the number of ends, but hopefully within the next couple weeks, I'll get these ends weaved in, and then I want to put a nice ruffle border on it, so that'll be fun. If you watched my Whips and Weaving Wednesdays video, you would have seen most of my projects, but not quite all of them. And there was one I completely forgot to pull out for that video. It's this beautiful drop stitch or drop V-stitch blanket. This is worked up with 3 balls of yarn, blue, yellow, and white. This is using Basic Stitch by, I think it's Lion Brand, Basic Stitch, yeah. And what's going to be great about this blanket is the ends work up nice and straight. It's a V-stitch, so it's easy. And the way that it's worked up, there's only going to be 3 ends to weave in from the start and 3 ends to weave in for the finish. The kind of bad thing about this, I'm following a vintage pattern, so I didn't have any examples or any feedback as far as how the pattern would work up. And with the combination of this stitch and the yarn that I used, it's kind of heavier than I would like. So definitely wouldn't be for a little baby, but it would be great for a toddler. So I think I'm going to work it up a little bit longer than I normally would, and then put a nice border. And again, this is something I think that would look good with a ribbed border or something like that. But I really love the way it worked up with like kind of a print. So I think I'm about halfway done based on where I am now. You know, I'll probably want to add another 12 inches or so to it, and then it'll be good to go. But this one works up really quick, and this is a perfect TV blanket because you're working into the space of the V-stitch, so you don't have to be able to see where the stitch is to work into it. I will be creating a pattern for this, as well as a crochet chart and a tutorial video once it's done. This is a vintage pattern, but it is in the public domain. And so I'll get that all translated into modern terms because it definitely wasn't, at least not what I was reading from, and we'll get it posted. But that's a whip I hadn't showed you before. I thought you might like to see. Another whip that I have is my car project. And again, I haven't showed you this one, but I did bring it in the house because I kind of want to knock it out and get it done. This is a Alpine Stitch beanie that I'm making for my daughter. And it's using Burnout Softy Baby. You can kind of see the Alpine Stitch there. And all that's left on it is the ribbing. And I'm going to mess up my hair here, but I'll put it on. The beanie itself is a little bit, I've got a ponytail in too, but it's a little bit big, a little bit loose. So what I did was I put a smaller hook. So I think I used a size 5 for the beanie itself. And I'm using this 4mm hook. I really love this curved hook for this kind of delicate work. But so I'm using this hook. What I'm finding though is that this baby yarn is so soft that it's really hard for me to get into the back loop stitches to make the ribbing. So, you know, I'm maybe a fifth, 20% of the way done. So I'll continue working on this over the week, but what happens is as I'm trying to get into those little stitches, my hands start to hurt. And again, I think it's just because it's so delicate. So this is what I worked on up actually just last night. And so I might set like a goal for myself for doing 5 a night or whatever. It's hard because when you're setting these goals for yourself, like I'm going to weave in 20 ends a night, or I'm going to do 5 rows of ribbing, and you have so many whips, then you start to be like, okay, and then I'll do 6 rows of that blanket and 2 rows of that blanket, and there just isn't enough time. So I do work on a lot of whips during the week, but I try to limit the number of goals that I set as far as what I'm going to get done, because it does add up. But that's another one of the whips. This was my car whip. And I think of what I'm going to do is if you watch the Whips and Weaving, I'm going to transfer that corner to corner cotton cake project that I have in a bag to be the car project, because that's a great easy one to work up. Last week I did show you my Speedy Granny Ruth, so I'm still working on that. I work on it 2 to 3 times a week, and I actually laid it out yesterday and measured the width and the length, and I calculated that I have about 25 more rows to go. So I get between 6 and 10 rows a night on it, every night that I work on it. I don't work on it every night. I get between 6 to 10 rows, so I figure I have maybe a week left as far as the back and forth rows, but I know it won't be done next week just because I'm really going to try to finish the border on the Juicy Fruits blanket, and I have to watch Krista's video. Again, this is a pattern from Krista at the Secret Yarnery. I'll have to watch her video, but I know we're going to be doing something with these tassels, I believe, to make them thicker. But I'm really excited about not having to weave in the ends on this one. So once this blanket is done, the pattern's not mine, so I can't post it and I won't be doing a tutorial. Krista does have a free tutorial, and I'll link that in the description for this, and I'll also try to put it up in a card. You know, I don't know which side it goes. It goes one of these sides. But I will have on my website the exact colors that I used for this blanket, as well as the color sequence. And I made a handy little progress chart that you can use to kind of keep track if you want to do this color sequence, keep track of what row you're on. So when this is a finished object, I'll have all that ready and I'll be able to put it on the website. So if you wanted to create this exact same blanket in this colorway, you could do that using her free pattern and then my color chart. During my whips and weaving video, I think mostly that video, I did have a couple people ask me about this blanket back here. So it is a finished object, but technically it's not an object that I finished in the past week, but I still want to show it to you. So this is a Yarn Inspirations pattern, and it's single crochets and then a tulip stitch, and I chose to do pink neon and yellow neon tulips. And then for the border, I worked just a black and pink moss stitch, and I really love the way that that came out. Am I holding it up? No, I've got it right side up here. And this is just one of my favorite couch blankets. I just have it on the couch. It's not too warm, and it's big enough to cover me and this dog right here, and it's just a nice blanket to have. Now I'll be honest, he's snoring. I'll be honest, I wouldn't do this pattern again, and let me tell you why. So this blanket is, so for a baby blanket, maybe it would be worth it, but for an adult size throw blanket, I really wouldn't do it. So you can kind of see this is pretty long. I mean, that's not my complete arm span, but it's, you know, it's pretty close to my complete arm span. And these little single crochet rows, there's 4 of them in between each batch of flowers, and they just took forever. And it got to be really monotonous, and this blanket took me over a year to complete because of it. I would almost kind of have to force myself to sit down and work on it. In fact, because I worked on this blanket, now when I go to use somebody else's pattern to create a new blanket, I always make sure to see if they have a ton of rows of single crochet like this, because if they do, I'll just skip the pattern. I don't like single crochets. I really hate them. So especially for that width and length, it was just, it wasn't my cup of tea. Now I do know that Krista at the Secret Yarnery just came out with a tutorial video for a tulip blanket that's very similar to this one. So in the description, I'll link both the Yarn Inspirations pattern as well as Krista's video, because I know some people prefer a written pattern and some people prefer to learn off of videos. So whichever suits your fancy, I'll have a link for both. So that's about it for today's podcast. Again, my plans this week are to finish the Juicy Fruits blanket, to try to get that ribbed edging on it. I'm going to try to get this hat done, though I don't know if I'll have the energy to do that whole ribbing for over the next week. This drop V-stitch blanket is almost done, so I may be able to get that done, though I probably won't have time to get the border done, so we'll see. This coming weekend, today is Friday that I'm filming this, and it'll be published on Saturday once I get it edited. So this weekend I am going to focus on creating the tutorial video for that corner to corner shell blanket that I showed you guys in podcast episode number 1. So check out that podcast if you haven't already, as well as I will be working on a few just basic stitch tutorials, like how to do a magic circle, how to do a double crochet for anybody who's really new to crochet. I think just having those on my channel for people to find. I know there's a ton of them out there, but you know, everybody learns differently, and everybody presents differently. So I'll create some of that content as well, because I do plan on using those videos for my website so that when I'm trying to teach a new stitch like that double triple ripple, if somebody doesn't know how to do the double crochet or the triple crochet, they can reference a video that I created for that to learn how to do the stitch and then create the blanket. So those are some of my plans for both this weekend and the upcoming week. Because I'm hoping to have 1 to 2 whips done this week, one thing I did want to ask you, so I'm now at that magic number where I wanted to be of 20 whips. So if I am able to get 1 to 2 whips finished this week, I'll be creating 1 or 2 new whips. Now I do have 2 projects in mind that I want to create. One is a chunky blanket. If you saw my yarn organization video, I have a ton of blanket yarn that I just need to use up. And so I want to go ahead and get that done because it's sitting in bags back here in my craft room, just out. So if I can create a chunky blanket, hopefully it would work up quickly, but also I can use up that yarn and just get it out of the bags and get things working neater, looking neater rather. So I have that planned. But the other thing I have planned is this really cool textured shell stitch. So it's textured and a little bit lacy. So I was thinking about doing a baby blanket for it, but I didn't really like the holes in it. I worked up a sample. So I'm thinking either doing a scarf or a rectangular shawl. So I think the textured shell pattern that I have is going to work up really great for that. But I'd like to hear from you guys. What would you prefer to see if I were to write a pattern using this stitch? Would you rather see a rectangular shawl or would you rather see a scarf? They're both pretty easy and should be pretty quick to work up, but I'd love to create something that you guys want to see because it doesn't matter to me whether I create a scarf or a shawl. I'd like to do something that you guys want to see. So that's all I have for today. I'd love it if you drop me a comment. Let me know what your favorite part about today's podcast episode was. Let me know if there is something that you'd like to see me cover, or if you have any questions for me, I'd love to hear them. I do try to respond to all comments, so feel free to drop your questions and your comments below. Until next time, keep calm and crochet on.